Hi Gordon. Today we're going to replace the master cylinder on a 300D Mercedes. It's the same on a 126 and a 123. Several cars have the same kind of master cylinder. Typically what would happen is the O-ring seals in the master cylinder would finally go bad after use, and the seal would start to seep and you wouldn't have much braking power. One of the symptoms might be that you're leaking fluid, but you can't see where the leak's going. You just keep adding fluid, and actually it's going into the power booster, which will show you probably if the master cylinder is leaking. But at any rate, it's not too difficult to change the master cylinder. After we change it though, we've got air in the system and we've got to bleed the brakes, and so we need some brake fluid, and we need a hose to drain the brake fluid out so that we don't have a big mess. And I'm just using a coffee can, so what I'll do is show how to drain the brake fluid out of the bleeder valve into some kind of receptacle like that. We need a few wrenches. I've got a 19 and a 17 millimeter. It's going to be used to take that vacuum hose off the power booster just to get it out of the way. And then the 11 millimeter is the brake line, and the 9 millimeter is the bleeder valve on the caliper, and the 13 millimeter will be used to take the two nuts off. I'm showing a couple of ways to bleed brakes here. These are both one-person operations. This is my preferred method, a power bleeder, but it's kind of expensive. This power bleeder is kind of an expensive way. If you don't bleed brakes very often, I wouldn't recommend that you invest the money, because it's I got this one from Performance Products. It's 45 or 50 bucks, or maybe even more, I can't remember. But anyway, it really is a good way if you just have one person. This is something I got years ago. As far as I'm concerned, it's made to sell. It's supposed to be a one-person brake bleeder operation. What you do is hook that onto the bleeder valve on the caliper, and then this is a little check valve. And so what you do is you put this in some fluid like that so that it's in liquid, and theoretically you can be the person in the car pumping the brakes, and you won't suck air back up into the line because of the check valve. My experience with these things, because that's a check valve, so as soon as you let the brake pedal back up, theoretically it won't allow air to be sucked back up into the line. The problem I have with these things is this part never works. It's supposed to fit over that little over that little bleeder valve and not come off. But as you start pumping brakes, typically, what my experience has been, it pushes this line right off the bleeder valve, and you don't know it because you're in the car and it doesn't work very well. So I don't use these things. What I would prefer to do if I'm reduced to this is just wait until I can get a person to help me bleed the brakes, and we'll show both methods, how to bleed it with two people and how to bleed it with a power bleeder. The part about changing the master cylinder is relatively simple. Let's go do that. You know, if you've noticed that your vacuum is weak in the car, there could be several reasons, but one of them, if you're also noticing that you're starting to get less braking power, is the power booster may be finally leaking. There's a rubber diaphragm in there, or neoprene, I don't know exactly what the material is. It's some kind of flexible material in there, and it eventually gets old and cracks and leaks and so forth. So if that's happening, that may be one of the causes for weak vacuum in the car. Now, of course, it could be the vacuum pump too, but assuming it's not the vacuum pump, one way to isolate it down to this brake booster is just to take a little vacuum pump and check it. So if you pull this vacuum line off, and you'd need a 19 millimeter wrench to take this, and I loosened it. But if you take this off, what you could do is, with a vacuum pump, you could evacuate it. Now it's going to take quite a while, and what I've developed is My dad, with a nice name for that would be a contraption. That's the easiest thing he could call that, or the nicest thing. It's just a system of hoses. What I had to do is reduce that big old hose to this little pump. And so I've set it up to where, I don't know what size that is. That's a 1/2 inch. So a 1/2 inch line goes right over that thing and will give me a tight enough fit. And then I just, a series of 3 little pieces of hose, I use some electrical tape to tape them up, and so finally I can get a seal with this vacuum pump. Now if I try to pump that up, it's going to take quite a while to evacuate it, but you can see that with that particular one I can never develop any kind of a vacuum, or practically nothing. I might have just barely a little bit of vacuum. Now, I have another car, and I know that the brake booster on it is good. So let's go look at the brake booster on a good car and just see how long it takes to pump up a vacuum on a good car. Okay. Now this one I know is good. Now just watch how long it takes. It's going to take quite a while to evacuate that thing, but you can see that eventually I can develop a vacuum in a good one. And I keep pumping it just to show you how long it's going to take you, because it's a huge canister. And now it's not perfect, but you can see that it holds it pretty well. And it might leak down just a little bit, and that's okay. You might have a little bit of a leak. I may not have a perfect seal here, but you see the difference between this one and a bad one. This one is good. It works very, very well. That one on the other car has leaked to the point where I need to change it out. So we're going to show how to change that vacuum booster out. And essentially, the illustration I always use, it's like a sail. You know, you've just got a little bit of vacuum here. So how does that little bit of vacuum help your braking power? Well, you got to remember that vacuum is applied across a big surface area. So it's just like a little bit of wind touching a sail. At any given square inch of that sail doesn't have a lot of force, but the forces are additive across the entire cross section of that booster. And so if you apply a little bit of vacuum across a big cross section like that, you get quite a bit of force developed, and that's the thing that accomplishes the brake boost. So let's go see how to change out that booster. Okay, so now we're going to remove the master cylinder. The master cylinder is this thing right here. It's got a reservoir on top. It's right in front of the device we call a brake booster. It's got a reservoir sitting on top of it, and it's got 3 brake lines, hydraulic brake lines connected to it. One here, and one on this side. But before we actually remove it, and it's fairly simple to remove, I always take this vacuum line off because it's real fragile. You got to be careful. There's 2 little connections, vacuum connections right here, and you see them broken all the time. And by the way, they're metered. You don't want to reverse these 2 lines. So the line here that goes to the EGR effectively, and it also goes to the transmission, and also goes to the ignition shut off, is the one closest to the front of the car. So the first thing, let's just take these 2 lines off, being careful not to break these little nipples. So we want to take those off, and then we want to take this line off just to get it out of the way. It's a 17 and a 19 millimeter. The 19 is that one, and I previously loosened it, that one. And then we need a 17 over here as a backup. We just want to be careful with it. These things are easy to break and they're expensive. to set that aside. Now, to take the master cylinder off, the first thing we have to do is disconnect these electrical connections. They're sensors to sense when our brake fluid is low. So we want to take that off, get it out of the way. And now the first thing we'll do is take these brake lines off, but we're going to drip a little brake fluid, and that stuff is very corrosive in terms of eating paint. So I want to go get a shop towel, put underneath there so that I don't wreck my paint. I've put a shop towel underneath those brake lines. These connections are 11 millimeter. You got to be careful not to round those off. I'm just very careful with them. There's a special kind of a wrench that has an opening. What is it called? It's a flare wrench. I don't have it in 11 millimeter. If you're careful, you won't round them off. There's just 3 of them. We're going to take these 3 lines off. And then there's just 2 13 millimeter nuts on the studs that we'll take off too. So I got this 3rd line off. You can see they're just dripping a little bit. And by the way, these master cylinders, you can rebuild them with a kit, but my experience is the kit costs practically what a master cylinder does. A master cylinder, perhaps you can shop around and find one for $100 to $125, and the kit is about like $85. Now the last thing to do is there are 2 13 millimeter nuts on studs. The studs come off of the off of the front of the brake booster, and we just need to pull those. So there's one there, got it loose, and then there's one over here. I'm just using a 13 millimeter box end wrench. I might be able to get a socket on there, but it would just be more trouble than it's worth. Now these are lock nuts, so they're never going to be able to turn them with your fingers. They're going to be hard all the way off. So it'll just take us a few minutes to get these off. Okay, so I got the 13 millimeter nuts off, and now it's just going to pop right off of there. Now you got to try to be careful not to get fluid all over the place. So there we are. Now you see there's an O-ring seal. We're going to have to be very careful. Oops, thank you. We're going to have to be very careful to make sure that that O-ring seals up when we put it back. But that's how we get the master cylinder off, and of course I'm dripping brake fluid all over, so I got to get this over. What typically goes bad with these master cylinders is, of course, the seal. The seal around that plunger leaks. You can see a little lock washer right there, a little lock ring to take it all apart. That's what you would do if you were going to try to rebuild it. As I say, I wouldn't rebuild it. I'd just buy another one. They're not that much difference. And when you rebuild them, you really have to, get them right. But at any rate, what happens is if you're leaking brake fluid, or you're adding brake fluid, and you can't figure out where it is because there's no leaks around the calipers, more than likely what's happening is the master cylinder. This is one of the symptoms of a bad master cylinder. This is a plunger, and around this plunger there are O-ring seals inside the shaft of this master cylinder. That's what pushes the brake fluid down the hydraulic lines. But as that seal breaks down and starts to leak with wear on the master cylinder as it gets old, you see there's also a seal right here, so there's no place for the brake fluid that's being pushed this way to go except inside this can. So you can't find any brake fluid anywhere, or you can't find any, but you're adding it, and you're going, what happened to that brake fluid? Well, it's inside this power booster, inside that canister, but the problem is here. The master cylinder is leaking, and so we need to change it. Now we're going to show how to replace this power booster, but the first thing we have to do is remove the master cylinder, and you can refer to our video on that. This one, you see the master cylinder is removed. So in order to replace this power booster, you got to first remove the master cylinder. Once you remove the master cylinder, it's really not very difficult, but the bolts are in the back. This is the new master cylinder. There are 4 bolts on these studs. There are 13 millimeter nuts, I should say, on these studs, not bolts, nuts. And this 13 millimeter is the size, and then the brake pedal is connected here. There's just a pin through this, and it's connected to the brake pedal. So theoretically, it's real easy. The problem is it's in a nasty spot. So we're going to have to go get these bolts, and actually these nuts. One of these nuts is the bad one. The one that's on the top left as you look at it toward the door is in a real nasty spot. The rest of them are pretty straightforward. All we have to do is take this pin out, take these 4 nuts off, and this thing comes out from the front. We'll try to use some camera work and show you where these nuts are. It'll be pretty obvious because, you know, as you look at it, they're just on the other side, on the back side of the firewall of this thing, so it goes like that. And as I say, that one of the nuts is just in a nasty spot. What we need is a few long extensions. I've got like a 10-inch extension that I'm going to show to try to get this nut off. And then I got a 6-inch extension, a ratchet, a deep 13 millimeter socket, and a wobble joint. Those are the things that I need to take this thing off. And then I'm going to need a big pair of needle nose pliers to pull the locking pin. It's like a cotter pin, except it's not exactly a cotter pin, but there's a cotter pin over here, and I need a long pair of needle nose to pull that pin out so that I can get this off the brake pedal shaft. So let's go look at that. Okay, now I've already pulled the kick panel off this driver's side over here, and actually I just now pulled the pin off, and Gordon, you can show where it is. There's a little locking pin. You just follow the brake pedal, follow that shaft up, and you'll see about maybe 10 inches up there's a pin, and there's a little it's like a cotter pin, but it's kind of a locking mechanism, and you just have to take a pair of needle nose like I have and pull it off. Let me show you what it looks like. See that locking pin? It goes through a shaft. Now we're just going to pull the shaft, push the little pin out of the shaft. There's nothing to it now once we get the locking pin off. See, the shaft just comes off, and then that pin went through there. Now the pedal is free. Now it's just a matter of getting those 4 nuts off. And the easiest ones, let me show you an easy one first, and I think you'll see where the difficult one is. But if I just use...
I can see the easy one.
Yeah. If I just use a long socket, a deep socket, and a wobble joint, I can get that one, for example, and a ratchet. Now see, I just got that one off of there, dropped it down. So much for the easy stuff. I've got another easy one here on the bottom. It doesn't look very difficult. Except my socket looks like it's a little long. So I'm gonna have to change sockets or get an open end wrench. And then there's one up here on the top. I don't know if you can see it, Gordon, but and I actually, instead of showing all this on film, because I'm going to have to get underneath there and it's going to be very difficult to have the camera, my head's going to be in the way, we'll just leave it up to the mechanic to understand the 4 nuts. You can see where they are. One is on the bottom here, one is on the top, and one is completely hidden from our camera. It's way up here on the top left-hand corner as we look at it. Now, I have right now a long extension. It's over 12 inches, I believe. We'll measure it when we get it out of here. It might be a 16-inch extension. Wobble socket and a deep 13 millimeter socket. And that's how I got onto, finally. It takes some patience, but that's how I got on that nut. And you can see that I've put the shaft of the thing
right above the big wiring harness and right below the ductwork for the air conditioner, and that's how I snaked it up under there. And that is the only way I've ever been able to get that nut off. Okay, good.
Okay, so the hard part was getting those 4 bolts off, those 4 nuts, and now it's easy. I've got them all off. I've got the brake pedal disconnected, and the thing ought to just come right out of there. See? So that's it. Now it's got a little seal. All it is a dust seal to keep dust out of the passenger compartment. We'll put that on the new one. Put it back in there. One last comment. You can see this one has had some fluid leak when the master cylinder was leaking once upon a time. But if the master cylinder has leaked fluid, that might have been the problem that broke the seal or ruined this thing, because when the master cylinder leaks, it just goes in there. So you got to be careful that you don't have fluid all inside this thing. You very well could have if that was the thing that wrecked the seal in the first place. So just be careful that you don't dump fluid all over your car when you pull this thing off. Okay, so we're going to put this one back, this new one in there, and remember to put this little dust seal there. And as you put it in there, pay attention to the orientation. It's just easier to get the orientation of this bar correct before you put it in there. We know that we want the vacuum attachment right up there on the engine side, kind of up from the horizontal position. And so if you remember, this piece has to be horizontal. The pin goes in like that. So we don't want the pin to be up and down, we want the pin to be horizontal. So other than that, paying attention to that, we just put it in there. That's the easy part. Getting that top bolt on the door side is the booger, but the other 3 aren't too bad. So we'll leave that up to you. There's not really anything different about assembling those 4 nuts onto those studs, nor is there anything tricky about pushing that pin through for the brake pedal. So we just have to reassemble it, 4 bolts, and then put the pin in a little locking cotter pin affair, and we're done on the inside. Okay, we've got the master cylinder back on now, and our last problem was to bleed all the air out of the system.